I see people are still streaming in. I'm just going to do a quick little kind of audit to understand how many of you are from startups in the room? Okay. How many are from organizations that are trying to do this fintech disruption and building transformation? Some of you. So my name is Jacqueline. I'm a partner with Profit. So I think these 2 days you have seen a lot of different views about the trends and technologies and markets and how it is evolving. I'm going to offer you a little bit of a different view. So I come from a consulting growth company that we look at and helping companies invest in innovation, look at digital transformation and how to grow the business. And obviously the fintech disruption is a huge component of the change, especially in Asia. Interestingly, in about 20 odd years ago, I kind of started and stumbled upon, I would say, the first fintech disruption in Hong Kong, right? This is a long time ago. I started about 4, I think. But you will know Octopus, right? Everybody may have traveled on Octopus when you're in Hong Kong. And that's very much one of the first kind of like wallet-free payment mode that has disrupted the whole transportation as well as the retail business in Hong Kong. I would say, having developed that Octopus brand with the government here, one of the things that I thought that they didn't do as well was really to move into the relevant space and evolve with the market. So they lost huge opportunity being in the mobile payment mode, being able to extend beyond the MTR to the taxis and getting into your wallet a lot more than the Alipay and the WeChat Pay. So my talk today is going to focus a little bit about design thinking, but from a different perspective, right? And this is going to be a lot of hard data, and I think data is important in your business. This is from something that Facebook shared, and I think we do know that the biggest social media companies are involved in the disruption of fintech. So everything from not just connecting and sharing, they're going to be involved in the space of sharing, they're going to be in the space of selling, they're going to be in the space of AI and VR, and this is just the roadmap of Facebook. And we know that today, the power is really in the hands of consumers, right? So if you think about where the fintech industry has evolved over the years, it has been dominated by the banks and the insurance companies, but these days, consumers have to say. So the mobile and the phone, they demand what you want, right? So they can get information, they can compare information easily, they can buy easily. So the consumer is really the king. And in many ways, if you think about banking products and insurance products, I think these are the two sectors that probably insurance in particular are the slowest in terms of transformation, right? So banking has done a little bit better in terms of breaking out, in terms of trying to adopt digital, especially in payments, still a little bit like silos in some parts of the market. But insurtech, in many ways, are really, really behind. And there's this fear, especially with big companies. So for startups who are working with big companies that we work with, there's this big fear about digital paralysis, right? A lot of organizations want to transform. They know digital transformation is important. But the companies we work with, a lot of them are in huge insurance companies and financial companies. They actually found it really hard to transform the legacy system into something meaningful. They know it's important, right? But how? And we are like at this tipping point. So if you look at how digital transformation has evolved over the years, when digital became available initially, it was all about trying to get ERP, CRM, system efficiency, so that's really important. And over time, with the web kind of like onboarding in the late 90s, you start to see a lot of like comms, email, selling, and web. But we're at this tipping point right now, whereby because of the social media connections, if you may, selling became a key component in digital. It sounds easy, but the truth is the hardest digital disruption is really in fintech because money is involved. So trust plays a big factor, not technology. And this is a bit boring, but the truth is we see a lot of companies doing a lot of things wrong, right? A lot of companies are trying to push technology and not trying to think about the needs of the customers. So a lot of times you think that, hey, let's build more capabilities. They're not thinking about internally how companies should transform. Mindset is important. The entire organizational structure is important to shift towards digital. So we work with companies like electronics. So how does selling vacuum, oven, got to do with digital? So the IoT of things is important, right? They know it's important, but it's not just transforming product. The whole process of product development through to the mindset of organization, through to the system of how they've been doing in terms of development and selling needs to change. So it's a long process. A lot needs to be done. And we know from research, right, that at least 77% of companies, I would say 2/3 of everybody, are involved in some kind of digital and marketing capabilities to transform. However, a lot of companies are less successful because you would know, if you work in big organizations, digital transformation sometimes sits in silos. It sits in certain digital department or the data department or the engineer department, and sometimes marketing, strategy, customer sales are not as integrated as you like. So the bigger the company goes, the harder that the transformation comes. And often we realize that in terms of product development, speed is the kind of a bottleneck, right? It doesn't really transform as fast as you go. Test and learn, prototyping, rapid prototyping is not done enough in organizations. Even startups working with organizations don't really understand how to integrate your offer into big organization and also how to sell to the leadership. It's not selling to investors, right? If you want to get best products out there, it's really understanding how to pitch your pitch to the organization, not just to the investors. So we did a lot of kind of like work in the space, understanding how to transform consumers and digital companies together. What is really important for us is we saw a few things wrong, right? A lot of startups, a lot of companies are investing in big ideas. They're investing in product user experience. They are also investing in trying to change business model. And through a lot of the work we do in terms of like getting into the market for research and also the kind of work we do across the world globally, we saw that a lot of people are getting it wrong. I'm just going to give you one quick research we did in China. So a lot of you are probably a little bit interested in breaking into the Chinese market. So Profit actually about 4 years ago embarked on what we call a brand relevance index research. And this is done in US, UK, Germany, and China. So we have done this research in a different space, right? You will hear a lot of things about brand valuations in the market. Brand values are meaningless to consumers, right? They don't care if you're a big company and I'll buy your product. They think about what is relevant to them. So in this brand relevance index study we commissioned in China, it was done across 30 categories of products. It's not just in digital, but everything down to day-to-day product in terms of CPG products, to retail, to shops, to commerce, to networking. We look at all categories, and we look across both Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities, across 13,000 consumers. And then we conducted this research across 50,000 consumers across US, UK, Germany, and China. Not all of Asia, unfortunately, just China. And there's some interesting findings, right? What do consumers want? Do they want technology? Do they want price? What are the most important things to them? And we measured 4 key pillars in this research. Number 1, how customer obsessed are the brands and products, and is this important to consumers? Are brands are so important in their life that they can't live without them? Are brands pragmatic? Are brands available where consumers want them to be? Are companies and products inspiring? Because you would want to buy a product that's inspired, right? And then is a brand innovative? So I think these, in many ways, are interesting things to most consumers. They don't think about it, but there's actually, if you pillar 1 and 2 are very much the functional portion of the benefit of a product, and then 3 and 4 are very much on the innovation and inspiring space. Now, both are important because consumers they buy products that's both functional, practical, but things that they love, right? because brands are important. We've also matched this to the S&P 500, and we found that brands which are more relevant and did well in our index, not whether they are a big company, but the better they rank on relevance, the better they perform on the S&P 500. And this is not just outperforming companies in revenues, but also in profits. And this is just one result. You can actually download it from profit.com. We have a full white paper and the research insights. This is just in China, right? The top 50 in China. Now, the reason why I'm showing this to you is for two reasons. Only in China, the top two brands are local, Alipay and WeChat. Now, we are not measuring corporations, not Alibaba, so we're looking at consumer brands, right, in this instance. I highlighted two key ones, Alipay, WeChat Pay, and at number 50, China Merchant Bank. What was really interesting about our study was, in all of our brand relevance index across the world, no insurance company and no banks appear in the top 50. No. Consumers do not care for any of the traditional banks or traditional insurance company. In China, only China Merchant Bank was number 50. Interesting, right? It's the only bank that appeared in top 50 twice in a row for us. All other insurance company, all other banks rank outside of top 100. They're not relevant, not important. What we found really interesting was China Merchant Bank is a bank that is extremely pragmatic in the way they deliver the product and services. But what's really interesting is it's also a bank that invests heavily in technology and innovation. I mean, it, for example, launched a face recognition payment way before Apple, and this is 2 years ago. And Alipay and WeChat Pay probably is like not surprising, right? It is like dominated in terms of the ecosystem in China. In the top 50, what's interesting is, obviously in the digital space, because of the ecosystem mandated by the government in China, you don't see many global players. However, in the top 50, there are 31 global brands that are more meaningful and relevant in consumer lives, and all other local brands are in the space of music sharing, photo sharing, as well as networking and e-commerce. And this is primarily because it's really relevant in the Chinese lives. So what should we make of all this, right? This is like, wow, this is interesting information. So I went back thinking how I've been in the industry for the odd 30 years and see how the industry has transformed. I've only used one brand of computers in my life, which is Apple. I've never used a PC. HP, IBM, Lenovo, never used it, right? So since my early days of DOS system in IBM, I know I'm a little bit old. Some of the startup people don't even know what DOS system is. And then I stumbled upon Macintosh, and then saw the entire wonderful user experience and never left the ecosystem of Apple. Now I'm going to bring back something into the 80s, and one of the person I really admire, and let him talk about it. Since this is a FinTech session, I'm going to let Steve tell us a little bit more. Can we play the video?
Yes.
Mr. Jobs, you're a bright and influential man.
Here it comes.
It's sad and clear that on several counts you've discussed, you don't know what you're talking about. I would like, for example, for you to express in clear terms how, say, Java, in any of its incarnations, addresses the ideas embodied in OpenDoc. And when you're finished with that, perhaps you could tell us what you personally have been doing for the last 7 years.
You know, you can please some of the people some of the time, but one of the hardest things when you're trying to affect change is that people like this gentleman are right in some areas. I'm sure that there are some things OpenDoc does, probably even more that I'm not familiar with, that nothing else out there does. And I'm sure that you can make some demos, maybe a small commercial app that demonstrates those things. The hardest thing is how does that fit in to a cohesive, larger vision that's going to allow you to sell $8 billion, $10 billion of product a year? And one of the things I've always found is that you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. And I've got the scar tissue to prove it. And I know that it's the case. And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer? Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have, and then how are we going to market that? And I think that's the right path to take.
I think that's still relevant today, right? I mean, the fashion is a bit irrelevant in terms of what they wear, but I think all he says was like this, the phrase he mentioned, customer experience. I think that's a big thing that all banks, insurance company are trying to think about, right? How do we understand the pain points? How do we design the customer journey? And I'm not sure the startup companies here think about it when you start to do your product development. Do you start with the technology? Or do you start with thinking about which pain or which needs am I trying to uncover so that I can actually develop a winning product? If you start with the technology or trying to find a white space or trying to change the status quo, I think you'll probably have a long way to go. Now, if you can uncover a need that's going to be something that you can do better, so I'm going to give you a little bit of tips, especially for startup, right? So if you want to be successful, how do you actually sell something quicker, whether to the investors or to a company who adopt your product? So we actually did a research in Innovate Finance in the Europe market, and then we actually spoke to and did a very deep research with a lot of fintech companies, and we found a few things, right? We asked them, what do you think are the most important things to you to allow you to win? Now, there are 3 things that came out from the study. Number 1, every one of them say the customer is the most important. Obviously, innovation cannot be in vacuum without the customers. And secondly, being pragmatic, being able to execute it successfully. And finally, it needs to be relentlessly relevant. It must be something that's relevant to the needs of the customers in their life. And it's interesting, right? I mean, it sounds, wow, it's obvious. But the truth is, yesterday when I was judging some of the startup fintech pitch yesterday, one thing that was very, very clear was a lot of times some of the pitches, I couldn't understand the value proposition. The value proposition of what you're trying to pitch isn't clear. What is the value to the organization or the consumers? What are you trying to reinvent in terms of the experience, right? Because if you get your value proposition right, if you are able to think about reinventing the customer experience, then you are going to be able to add a meaningful difference to the end consumers or the organization. And we found from research, companies who are more relevant tend to grow twice as fast as everybody else. So customer obsession is key, right? You think about it, it's clear. So if you think about Uber, for example, Uber did not succeed because of its app or this technology. What did they do? They fulfill a need the consumers want, right? I want to have a taxi where I want it to be now, and I need it to come to me. So the success of Uber isn't in the technology. It was them adding more taxis on the road so that you can get one quicker and faster. So they open up the distribution. It's not about how good the app is. That's easy to copy, right? And so what did Grab do? Grab just went one step further, combined both the private cars and the taxis together in the ecosystem and grow in Asia. So it is not about disruption, but it's about relevant disruption. And we know customer experience is key. And in all of the research we did in Innovate and all of the research we did in China, customer obsession and experience is number 1, not the technology, right? So I know this, we're in a fintech world and in kind of a fintech conference today, and we think a lot more about technology and trying to sell more benefits, a lot of startups tend to think about that. Let's add more features to the product so that we can get investors to invest with us. Think differently again, right? And this is what they mentioned to us, right? That the things that's really most important were three things I mentioned earlier, right? Being able to offer a better experience, customer is important, and the third thing is really, how do I create a brand that people trust? And one of the hardest things for startup is creating a brand that people trust because we don't know you, right? And fintech is different from Uber. You will be able to hop into an Uber taxi anytime because the contract you make with the driver and the company is a little bit easier. But in the fintech and the insurtech space, for you to make a commitment, a contract, we're talking about money. We're talking about trust. We're talking about security. The connection, it's not so easy. It is not about a tech anymore. So one thing we found that was quite clear was a lot of fintech companies are not doing as well in terms of trying to have better ways to engage with customers. They are also underperforming in getting better experiences. There's a lot of good product idea, but the way to enhance the experience isn't there. Sometimes it's too complex. Some of the pitch I heard yesterday was too many features. Some of them are irrelevant, some are peripherals. And not everything is central, right? So sometimes go back to simplicity. Think about one big value proposition that can change the entire needs and fulfill something better. And this white paper, again, you can contact me after the conference. I can download, I can share with you all the insights so you can see it. So this, I know it's a lot of diagrams up there, but the hygiene factor that we saw most companies trying to do digital transformation, as well as startups, are investing in areas by trying to change the status quo. Let's get product more. Let's try to be the first product in the market. You are really underperforming in where? In trying to make meaningful differences in consumer life. You are also trying to not invest enough in trying to understand the needs of the consumers. You're also underperforming in trying to create a brand that people could trust. So because I work in the strategy and growth space that combine both the art and science, when we look at a pitch from a startup, you cannot just focus on the product. You have to look at not the features. Consumers are emotional. So we buy a product and a brand we trust. So you have to go back to the space of the category to create a brand or a product that looks credible, right? So in the fintech space, the biggest component is trust. So you have to come across as not as a creative and an exciting product, but it should come across as a product that somebody can trust and put money with you. So what is really what we saw in terms of the actual output? Everybody is trying to invent a disrupted product in the space. We're trying to change the status quo. Let's create a new product nobody has used before. It doesn't work. It takes a long time. You're probably in beta mode most of the time. But what you're not doing enough, especially in product development or trying to change the fintech world, is to understand, how do I change an experience and make it better? Okay? Cover and kind of fulfill and unfulfilled needs that's not been met. How do I do it better? And it's not about trying to do things a little bit like clever, more clever. It is really about trying to make sure that you're fulfilling a relevant change and need. And I think in execution, it's probably where most startups are still in beta mode. It's also the time we work a lot of companies. We saw them start a lot of new digital projects. They tend to sit in silos and never really go anywhere. So being pragmatic, when you develop a product, you must be able to execute it. If you're doing a product that can actually merge into the ecosystem with the organization that you sell to, whether it's B2B or B2C, it's got to be something that can come to life, right? Technology must be practical. So we found from research both in China as well as in Innovate Finance that pragmatism and being really truly delivering a need in customers are key. You've got to have a consistent experience as well, right? And that's the way to build trust. A brand that consistently gives you the consistent experience are more trustworthy. And you're also available where I want it to be. how I want it to be, just like Uber I mentioned, and obviously it makes my life easier, right? I will skip this. This is really, I think, for startup in particular, if you think about the way you developed your product, think about customer acquisition in terms of the needs, go into how you can develop it in terms of bringing it to life pragmatically, and then that's how you get trust, and then over time, grow the brand. So don't forget about the brand portion of the business. So even in established company, to offer a new digital change in the product, you've got to offer something that's going to be pragmatic, that people can trust. So in the relevant space of fintech, right, so the third point I'm going to make is that you've got to stand out because you have a relevant product for the consumers, not a new product, relevant product. That's a very different thing. So what is relevant today, for example, Octopus I mentioned, right? 20 odd years ago when I worked with them, the contactless card is great. That was relevant in that point in time because you could just take a wallet and scan it. I'm surprised that Octopus is finding it very hard to move in the mobile. WeChat, Apple Pay, Visa Pay, all the other payments are in the mobile phone. You can pay through the taxi, contactless is key. They are not relevant today, right? So will Octopus be irrelevant in 10 years to come? Possible. So what is important is also in the Innovate research we did, they say there's a lot of cool ideas out there. And I saw a lot of cool ideas yesterday in the pitch. But not many of the companies become successful. You'll be wondering why they're great ideas. Why are we not successful? So I'm going to, and this is, again, something I've already mentioned. So if you go through the white paper, I could actually share with you. As I said, you are underperforming in terms of trying to understand, fulfill the needs better. You're spending too much time trying to change the status quo. And you're not investing enough time. You probably have great culture, by the way. We found that fintech companies have some of the coolest culture that attract great people. But what you're not doing enough is not internal, it's not the product, but you're not investing enough in talking to customers or conducting more insights to test your product. So I'm going to end off my talk with kind of a way you could set a model of how you can do product development, both for companies as well as for startups. So a new way of thinking is needed, right? So if we talk about design thinking in product development, I've worked with the likes of Coke, developed Heaven and Earth, developed Virtu, which now ironically is irrelevant in the Nokia space, and work with Nokia. So how do you want to develop a product become consistently relevant? Remember, right, I mentioned these three things. Technology is at the back end. The three things you need to do is, number one, with customers in every step of the product. But we're talking about deep customer journey, right? Think about the journey and the pain point you're fulfilling and how to do it better than everybody else. Make sure that the execution is seamless and easy. And thirdly, make sure that you're fulfilling something that's relevant. And think about customer experience, right? Especially for organization. You do not need to reinvent customer experience. There's no such a thing called disrupting and reinventing a new customer experience. There's no such thing. For the larger the organization go, what you tend to do is to optimize and change a little bit, right? Make it a little bit better. And that's really in the optimization stage. If you work with organizations who are just trying to stay a little bit more in the innovation space, if you may, they may just want to engage with customers in a new way. So the second ring is really about how do I provide, for example, services to millennials in a new way. Millennials don't like to go to the bank. They do want to find out how to get a mortgage loan. They want to talk to us. They hate to call us. How do we engage with them? So OCBC Bank in Singapore had Emma. Some of you may know the product called Emma, chatbot. So they launched an AI that basically talk about how to assist millennials on inquiring on mortgage sales, right? In 6 months, they made 70 million worth of mortgage sales. Amazing. Very simple product enhancement, not disruptive, but merely changing customer call and visit to the bank to a chat box with Emma. And then you think about transformation. A lot of fintech companies make the mistake of trying to move to number 3. And this is a chart we use for organization a lot. So I know it's a lot of words there, but a lot of you tend to be in the space of invention. For companies to be truly inventive and disruptive, a lot of things need to change. The entire business model The entire legacy system of their ERP, CRM has to change. That takes a lot. So if you're trying to think about products to move into invention space, think about it. The business model, as well as the ecosystem, whether with the regulation or the marketplace, has to change. That's probably the hardest. Most companies are doing innovation today. We're talking about enhancement and doing things better. And that's what I mentioned about Emma just now with OCBC. And so if you want to truly do disruptive relevance in terms of design thinking, don't think about just the operational technology. Integrate both digital customer experience as well as operational excellence, right? You need to think about two things. When you come up with a product, whether internally for a big organization or a startup, you need to be able to embed yourself into the organization, because companies who want to do true digital transformation need to reinvent the whole organization. Companies who want to be able to reach customer better need to make sure that everyone in the company understands what that is. So mindset change is part of customer experience internally. And on the company side, most companies, as the bigger they go, the poorer they are. So a mindset change. So how do I change somebody from Electrolux who have designed vacuum cleaner for the last 20 years in the same way into the IoT of things, right? What is smart home to old employees of the staff who had one way of doing product development? Develop the product, push to customers. So now you've got to change. Think about the customer space, then push to the customer, then invent the product. So there are 4 M's, that's the way I call it, in trying to develop a truly winning digital transformation or a product. Think about first the mission. What problem are you trying to solve? What kind of customer experience strategy are you trying to get better? What are we trying to transform? Secondly, think about moves, right? So for new products, you don't change something in the end. You think about transformation moves, right? Especially for a lot of you who think about new products or company who wants to get an ideal product, you think about the end and you try to do so many things to get to the end, right? Think about moves and the roadmap of going towards that. And importantly, mindset, right? So the mindset for organization is key. And finally, it's, of course, how do you do it? We are also currently working with Alibaba, and in fact, we're working with them to help all the digital companies in China to get better in terms of data analytics. How do I use data to better serve customers? So we have developed a model. Again, you could download the white paper called META, M-E-T-A, which is all about, do you stay and maintain the status quo? How do you evolve? How do you transform? And how do you change the approach in terms of businesses? So this model is developed specifically for Alibaba with all the hundreds and thousands of companies. So download the white paper. And you could see a little bit about trying to change the status quo in China in digital. I'm going to end off my talk just to show you one case study that we did. It is not in fintech.
Wireless carrier T-Mobile was poised to merge with
But it showcased how you can use customer insights to win. Now, this is not in fintech, but in telco, right? Kind of the same. But I'll show you the T-Mobile case study to think about how you can become a really truly winning product. Let's play the video. Again? Can we play it again? Sorry. Can we start it again?
Here we go.
Sorry, we'll play the video again.
Wireless carrier T-Mobile was poised to merge with rival AT&T. But when the deal fell through, it found itself in a vulnerable position. Ranked 4th in a 4-player category, it had a lot of ground to make up to fight back as a solo brand. Customers complaining about dropped calls and data access were leaving for other carriers. T-Mobile hired Profit to help them create a plan for future growth.
Here we go.
We started with a deep understanding of the customer and uncovered intense frustration, not just with T-Mobile, but with the entire wireless category. While our analysis across different consumer segments was highly complex, the insights were astonishingly simple.
Carriers do not appreciate customers. They don't take care of customers, and customers do not feel appreciated.
People were tired of feeling taken advantage of by their wireless company. New customers seemed to get better deals than loyal ones, while monthly bills usually contained an unwelcome surprise. But most of all, people hated contracts. They wanted a wireless brand that didn't hold them hostage. That key insight, combined with management's willingness to defy conventional wisdom, led to the development of a new value proposition that has become known as the Uncarrier. Profit helped integrate the Uncarrier strategy into the broader brand, business, and experience plan, starting with the development of new products and services aimed at meeting the needs of their most frustrated customers. We worked with the T-Mobile team to quickly innovate a series of rapid moves, like tearing up wireless contracts, Wi-Fi calling, and an industry-leading upgrade plan. Energetic marketing and advertising further reinforced the Uncarrier's feeling of freedom.
I like that.
The new business model generated $1 billion in new revenue in the first year, 13 million new customers, and massive gains in market share. Within 2 years, it pushed rival Sprint out of the number 3 spot, and it's currently ranked the best of all carriers by leading industry sources, including Consumer Reports.
So I think that sums up quite well, right? I mean, we started with understanding the frustration and the pain point of customers, and then you think about the product and development in terms of product and services, and then you think about rapid moves, as I mentioned, to grow the business. So this is my email and contact. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, and then feel free to reach out to me if you want to get some of the white paper and research. They are all available for you to share. Thank you.